would be in everybody's interest.
A handful of Social Democrats in the House of Commons will clearly be part of that bridgehead for common sense, which most people want to see between the two big parties. That slanging match in the House of Commons that we see nightly on our television screens really offends a great many ordinary people in this country. Some of the people in the big parties are more interested in party politics than in people. And what Social Democrats have always said is that people are much more important than politics.
To help the Social Democrats, write to John Cartwright and Rosie Barnes at 144 Greenwich High Road, London SE10 8NN, or telephone 081 691 1883. That's 144 Greenwich High Road, London SE10 8NN, or telephone 081 691 1883.
That broadcast by the Social Democratic Party will be repeated at 10:30 on BBC Two.
Gripping, clawing, clinging. Are the strongest holds natural or man-made? Gripping stuff from QED, tonight at 9:30 on BBC One.
The Good Wife on BBC Two now is an Australian film drama set in the 1930s, a powerful but cautionary tale of the perils of allowing boredom to take over in marriage. This is BBC One. Now the 9 o'clock news with Michael Burke.
The Irish schoolgirl who's pregnant after being raped can come to Britain for an abortion. The Supreme Court in Dublin has overruled a decision that stopped her leaving the country. And the government is giving Manchester £55 million to help its bid for the Olympics. Good evening. The Irish Supreme Court has decided that a 14-year-old rape victim can leave the country to seek an abortion in Britain. Abortion is illegal in Ireland, and the High Court there had ruled that she mustn't leave the Republic until the baby was born. After a 3-day closed hearing, the Supreme Court overruled the earlier decision, though it won't give the reasons behind its judgment until later. The new Irish Prime Minister, Albert Reynolds, welcomed the ruling in what he described as a sad and distressful case. His government paid the cost of the family's appeal, estimated at £50,000. Our Ireland correspondent Dennis Murray reports.
Albert Reynolds was in London tonight to discuss the problems of Northern Ireland with John Major. Both men want to see the tragedy there at the top of their agendas. But it's a private tragedy in the Republic and the court actions which have flowed from it that have dominated Mr. Reynolds' 2 weeks in office. Speaking within the last hour at an impromptu news conference with Mr. Major, he expressed his relief at today's court decision.
I welcome the Supreme Court's decision. From a humane point of view, it certainly takes away the uncertainty and gets rid of the legal complexities that were indeed a source of worry and burden to the family concerned and especially to the young girl concerned.
Thousands of demonstrators have been taking to the streets in Ireland since this case became public. Outraged that a 14-year-old victim of rape, pregnant at the end of more than a year of sustained sexual abuse by an adult, was prevented, along with her parents, from choosing whether or not to travel to Britain for an abortion. The Irish High Court banned the family leaving Ireland because of a clause in the country's constitution that protects the right to life of the unborn child. The Irish Supreme Court has today effectively decided that the family is now free to travel from the Irish Republic to anywhere they want, for any purpose they want. It's a legal benchmark on a moral issue. The divisions over abortion in Irish society remain unchanged.
It was never our intention to restrain girls from going to England. We would wish they didn't go. We would wish they went for pro-life counselling here. And I've no doubt those who do go for pro-life counselling will not have their babies killed in England. There's a human life there. It's a real life. And I am hoping and praying that this little girl will not go to have a baby aborted in England.
Well, I think my immediate reaction is relief that the family, that this part of this family's trauma has ended. I think there's a great sense of relief here that the Supreme Court has issued its judgment in this way as quickly as it has.
Irish opinion now seems 2/3 in favour of changing the constitution or the Irish Parliament amending the law, which it may have to do.
Government action may still be required. We don't know the detailed reasoning behind the Supreme Court's decision. We'll only know that within the next couple of weeks. When we see that, it may indicate either that we still require constitutional change, or it may indicate that substantial changes are going to have to be made to the Maastricht Protocol.
European law does affect this controversy, but the Irish Republic's gone through a collective emotional and moral trauma over this young girl's case. Issues of abortion, rape and child abuse that the country hasn't resolved its attitudes on, and probably won't for years yet.
The talks between Mr Reynolds and Mr Major on Northern Ireland and Anglo-Irish relations are still going on in Downing Street tonight. I'm joined now from there by our Northern Ireland political editor, Jim Dougal. Jim, any signs of progress?
Well, perhaps some. I mean, what the two Prime Ministers have been doing here is to try and demonstrate their deep concern about the security difficulties in Northern Ireland over the past few weeks. And also, they're trying to encourage the political parties there to get back around the table and start talking. Now, I understand that on Friday, the leaders of the four main constitutional parties will meet to discuss the obstacles which appear to be in the way of full-scale discussions. And that meeting was the one which was suggested to them that they should take part in, and it was suggested by the Prime Minister when they met him here earlier this month.
So, talks about talks on Friday. Any chance of getting down to real negotiations before the election, say?
Well, we'll see after Friday. I mean, one of the big problems is the election. They're going to find it very difficult to talk in Northern Ireland in an election period. What the Prime Minister has been saying to them is that the party leaders, the constitutional party leaders, can't stop terrorism, but he says that perhaps by talking they can alter the atmosphere in which it thrives, and I think that's what he's trying to get them to do.
Jim Dougal in Downing Street, thanks. The coal industry unions have welcomed the scrapping of plans to build an import terminal for foreign coal at Immingham on Humberside. The unions say 10,000 British mining jobs have been saved for the time being, but they've warned that many collieries remain under threat. The government say the collapse of the project involving the electricity generators, National Power and Powergen, is a vote of confidence in British coal.
The cancellation of the Immingham project saves 10 pits, but miners' leaders and opposition MPs believe it may be only a temporary reprieve. They don't accept the explanations of the port operators and Powergen and think the scheme may yet be revived. Associated British Ports said today it had pulled out of the deal for commercial reasons after Powergen raised late objections just as the final contracts were about to be signed.
Those decisions were quite minor. There was principles have been well established, but the more fundamental point was the question of a delay. And a delay commercially was not something which was acceptable to our company.
It's thought that the imminent general election may have caused Powergen to hold back. The company's chairman, Sir Graham Day, believes the Labour government would use its big state shareholding in Powergen to interfere in running the business. Labour and the unions doubt whether Immingham really is dead.
The jetty will still be built by ABP. It might cost them 30 or 40 million pounds. The other cost of putting in the coal handling plant could still be found in the future. So it is a temporary decision, but we welcome it nevertheless.
Britain consumes 78 million tonnes of coal a year, but only 7 million tonnes are currently imported because National Power and Powergen are tied to contracts with British Coal. Next year, those contracts run out, and despite the Immingham decision, imports from terminals at Kingsnorth, West Thurrock, Tilbury, and new ones at Liverpool, Hull and Bristol will enable the generators to import up to 22 million tonnes a year, still threatening miners' jobs. Tonight, Powergen refused to say how much it'll buy from British Coal under the renegotiated contracts, especially when home-produced coal costs at least 25% more than imports. The generators say British miners must become more efficient.
We need to persuade Powergen and National Power to place a long-term order with British Coal, somewhere in the region of 60 million tonnes of coal that will guarantee our job security without featherbedding us.
Ministers say the Immingham about turn dispels some of the gloom hanging over British Coal's future. But the generators insist that they haven't changed their minds about buying abroad and building more gas-fired stations. so the threat still remains, both to pits and miners' jobs.
Manchester's bid to host the Olympics in the year 2000 will get £55 million of government backing. After meeting representatives of the bid committee, the Prime Minister said, "We're going for gold. There are no prizes for coming second." The Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, welcomed the decision to back Manchester and said he thought the city would win. It'll be competing with Sydney, Beijing, Milan, Berlin, Brasilia and Istanbul for the Games. Our sports correspondent Rob Bonnet reports.
The Prime Minister and Bob Scott, the leader of Manchester 2000, have shaken hands on a lump sum that far exceeds any previous government contribution to sport. 37 of the £55 million will be invested in redeveloping the city's Victoria railway station, where there's to be a new indoor stadium. £6 million more will go towards the building of a cycling arena on this site in East Manchester, where another £10 million will be spent on purchasing and preparing land for the main Olympic stadium.
The Olympic Games in the Millennium is a very remarkable prize. I think nothing would be more suitable to celebrate the beginning of the new century than to have the Olympic Games here in this country. You may perhaps call it the romance in my soul, but I would certainly very much like to see that happen.
This is Manchester's second successive bid. They failed for 1996 because they had only models, not facilities, and because Mrs. Thatcher merely signed a letter of endorsement, not a cheque. Including transport and accommodation infrastructure, the Games' total cost approaches £1 billion. Today's sum is regarded as a first instalment.
If we get the Games, there will be considerable other facilities and resources that will have to be found. So the truth is that this is an amazing and clear statement of British support for our bid.
The Labour Party supports the announcement except for its timing. Too late, with votes in mind.
What we've seen is the approach of a general election. But I wouldn't want to diminish the commitment that they've made by equating it solely with the general election. I think the common sense and the force of the arguments put by Bob Scott and the people from Manchester, the local authorities, in favour of supporting the Games bid have proved to be conclusive.
The government has answered the electioneering charge by pointing up the Prime Minister's sporting credentials and the wholehearted involvement of the Labour-controlled Manchester City Council. Winning government money is one thing, winning the bid is quite another. Sydney are the favourites, Beijing the wild card, Milan and Berlin the other European cities. All have their own government support. But today's announcement does, in Manchester's own words, level the playing field as the bids are prepared for final consideration in September of next year.